To maintain white supremacy in the American South between 1882 and 1901, 2,000 African American citizens were lynched.
In 1999 Cambodia, the life of one of the most brutal leaders in the country's history, Pol Pot, came to an end. Millions upon millions of innocent lives were lost at the hands of this ruthless dictator. The sugar fields of Cambodia are still littered with their skeletal remains.
In just over 100 years, the pure Hawaiian culture declined from 500,000 to only 40,000. That's a decrease of over 92% due to disease brought by missionaries and intermarriage. In 1893, our beautiful Hawaiian queen, Liliuokalani, was arrested and forced to sign a decree of avocation, turning over the precious land of Hawaii.
Many of the saints were driven from their homes for no other reason than being Mormon. They were forced to build makeshift tent cities along the muddy banks of the Mississippi River. There, many contracted diseases and later died.
The master leaves the house in the middle of the night with only one thing on his mind. With a cold, calculated look in his eyes, he bangs on the door. The young black slave opens the door, helpless and defenseless to his fiery needs. What became of this rape was a child who would live the rest of his life torn between two races and accepted by neither.
Bear River Massacre, early morning on January 29, 1863, a valley near Franklin, Idaho. The entire nation of the northwestern Shoshone were killed in cold blood by the United States Cavalry. The soldiers from Camp Douglas in Salt Lake City were ordered to not spare no man, no woman, or no children's life. The only good Indian was a dead Indian.
An eagle perched on a cactus in the middle of a lake was the vision that led the Aztec people to now what is Mexico City. There they built the first known floating empire of the world. Their architecture, canal systems, gold craftsmanship, and mathematical ingenuity surpasses any ever seen. Within 50 years, their civilization was exterminated at the hands of the Spaniards. Now, the few remaining indigenous peoples are left with the stories of terrible disease and genocide.
In 1998, in Laramie, Wyoming, Matthew Shepard, a local college student, was viciously attacked. He was robbed, beaten, and left to die in an empty field on a freezing night in October. He died days later. His only offense, he was gay. The gay, lesbian, bisexual, transsexual group statistics report that 80% reported verbal abuse, 44% received threats of attack, 17% were verbally assaulted, 10% were assaulted with a weapon, and 79% did not report all incidents.
Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The final words uttered by millions of Jews still echo through the dreary, desolated corridors of concentration camps, such as Sobibor, Dachau, Treblinka, and Auschwitz.
I was only 12 years old when I first came to this country. My mom gave me enough gold to let me and my brother bribe the guards to let us escape. To stay meant certain death, but to go meant to leave my mom and my dad, maybe to never see them again. We were shot at, nearly drowned. We took many risks to come to this strange land.
Why, Dad? Why won't you let me come by and pick up some pizzas with my friends? Because, he said, I don't want anyone knowing that the owners of the store are Muslim. But why, I asked. Are you ashamed of our religion? No, was his answer. Then it was silent. I understood that no more questions were to be asked.
On August 28, 1955, Emmett Lewis Till, a 14-year-old African-American boy, was taken from his home by two white men for speaking to a white woman. 3 days later, his body was discovered on the bottom of the Tallahatchie River. Bullet in the head, one eye gouged out, and his head crushed. These two men were found not guilty by an all-white jury. Later, these two men admitted proudly to this horrific and senseless crime when interviewed by a magazine.
On August 6, 1945, the first ever atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan by the United States. Tens of thousands of Japanese were disintegrated or burned to death on impact. Due directly or indirectly to the bombing, 75,000 to 80,000 Japanese ultimately perished, and an equal number of them left wounded, burned, diseased, and crippled.
Talofa, Maloelele, Aloha, Pulavinaka, Yorana, Kia ora. These are many greetings from the beautiful Polynesian islands, also known as the heart of the South Pacific. Each are a dying language among many Polynesian children in America. Many of our traditions have been lost over the past generations through the lack of recognition from our present-day society. Today, the effects are still seen, as Tonga is the only remaining kingdom of the Pacific Islands.
In the middle of the night, a mob broke into the home of Joseph Smith. They drug him into the street, stripped him of all of his clothing, and poured boiling tar all over his naked body, only to cover the tar with a layer of feathers. 2 days later, his infant child died of an illness because all the ruthless mob left the door open. In the words of an LDS hymn, I stand all amazed.
A nameless face, we have no past to pull from. Why can't I be one kind? You can't define me by my color. You won't accept me for me. Listen to me. Hear where I come from.
When European settlers first came to this country, American Indians of all nations were seen as savages, beasts, and uncivilized people. The government of the United States felt that it was their duty to civilize American Indians, especially the children. American Indian children were ripped away from their families and homes and forced to go to boarding schools or live with white families. This lasted up into the 1970s. The end result, main indigenous traditions, customs, religions, rituals, dances, and songs are dead, and many of those that aren't are struggling for survival.
In the 1920s, young Mexicans left their families, crammed into a truck, and drove to the turnip fields of the Midwest for work. Promised good wages and decent living quarters. American farms recruited thousands. When our fathers, brothers, and uncles arrived at their destinations, their dreams of a better life would never come true. All of their possessions and money were confiscated, and they were herded like pigs into huts miles away from civilization. Afraid, confused, and helpless, Mexicans still worked the turnip fields for freedom, survival, minimum wages, and broken promises.
A junior in high school, he had finally worked up enough courage to tell his mom he was gay. Her response, "I'd rather you be dead than gay." Her wish was granted just days later, as a 17-year-old took his own life. Gay students are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than other teens.
A little garden, fragrant, full of roses. The path is narrow, and a little boy walks through it. A little boy, a sweet boy, like that of the growing blossom. When the blossom comes to bloom, the little boy will be no more. Of the 6 million Jews systematically exterminated during the Holocaust, approximately 2 million were children.
No one understands what I've seen. Family, friends, and neighbors brutally murdered right in front of my eyes. I was driven from my home, forced to walk for days along streets littered with the dead, only to end up living behind barbed wire in a refugee camp. No one understands what I've seen. I come to this country and I am expected to forget my past, but they don't realize I can't. I see it every night in my nightmares.
After the September 11, 2001 attack, hate crimes against Muslim Americans increased by an alarming 1,600%. Sure enough, right after the 9/11 attack, I sat in our living room watching the news, which was reporting that a local restaurant had been torched with flames on the account of the owner being Muslim. It was then that I understood why my father wouldn't let me visit our store.